Clothes and art are very much in general you get it or you don't type of thing, which might sound very vague at first, but just hear me out. There's a few key concepts that you need to learn in order to paint or draw good clothing, but once you have them down, the only difference between what you can draw right now and a photorealistic outfit is just repetition and being able to apply these concepts in different ways. So what are these concepts? Well, that's what we're here to explore and what I hope every person that watches this video is able to get down by the end of it. Now, normally this is the part of the video where I go into the whats and whys and show examples from other artists on how to do this and whatnot, but I want to do something a little bit different this time. So I have these 5 photos that I found on Pinterest covering various clothing topics, so I'll be sort of walking you guys through one at a time with me painting each of these, focusing on one topic at a time, going in order from what I think you guys should learn first to last. So without further ado, let's go into the most simple yet useful concept. Shapes are what make up good clothing, simple as that. You can't have good looking folds if the shapes that make them up don't look good together. So when making clothes, there's one key shape that you really want to look for initially. The shape that makes up all clothing folds, the good old triangle. In every single piece of clothing that I can think of, there is some kind of grouping of triangles that makes it up, aside from some weirdly tailored designs. But there's a few things to notice about these triangles. Let's take the reference that I'm about to draw for a moment. What do you notice about the overall shape of the triangles in this sweater? The more bunched up the clothing becomes, the more narrow and close together these triangles are, while in places where it's just fabric that is loose and hanging, the triangles are a lot more big and spaced out. So with this concept in mind, let's get into drawing this. When you create clothing, or honestly really anything, you want to start with the biggest shapes and you work your way to the small. So I did just that, keeping in mind the underlying shapes of what the body are. Here I represent the chest as a big vertical oval, while the bottom is more horizontal, with the shoulders and arms being spheres and cylinders. Once we're sure that the big shapes are done and looking accurate, that's pretty much half of the battle. All that's left is to take those big pieces and carve them into more precise shapes, keeping the overall natural flow intact. Feel free to push and pull some of the lines to really exaggerate the parts you want your viewer to focus on, which for this study I want it to be this shoulder fold in particular. And there we go, working from big to small and focusing on shapes like triangles, we can get a pretty good looking piece of clothing, especially in neutral positions. With these rules also applying to pants in pretty much the exact same way. And if you're wondering how I'm able to shade and color like this, well, we'll get to that later in the video. So now that we know the basic building blocks, well, more like triangles that make up clothes, it's time to start adding a few variables into the mix, because I'm sure you're more interested in drawing people in more than just a neutral position. In order to push and pull clothes like we want, we need to talk about something just as important as triangles: tension points. So we have this picture of a guy holding his arms up, a relatively normal pose I think, and immediately we see a clear pattern emerge with the top corners of the shirt being pinched towards the upper arm, while the middle makes a series of upside down triangles. Why exactly is this? And while we're at it, why exactly are the shapes that make up clothing triangles? What's wrong with the good old square or pentagon or something? Well, it all comes down to a few key things, mainly being gravity and tension. If you can tell, gravity exists. So every piece of clothing normally is being pulled down, with the only thing really holding up, say, your shirt being your shoulders or arms. Now, to explain this further, we're gonna have to go step by step. So first, we need to draw a rough diagram of this guy's body, which I've been drawing in the background. Let's analyze the mechanics of this shirt. Where and how exactly would shapes like triangles form? As we've established, gravity exists, so the shirt will naturally want to collect at the lowest parts of the body, in this case being the shoulder near the neck, and we can see this is reflected in the photo where the top corners of the triangles originate. As for the clothing near the sleeves, well, the combined power of stitching and friction on the arms are keeping them from sliding all the way down and affecting things that happen in the middle. Honestly, I think it's easier to just break this shirt up into 3 pieces. So the triangles start at the shoulders, and by the logic of gravity, the only place for the rest of it to go would be down. But this is where we have to be careful, because it's not just this one shoulder holding everything up, it's the other shoulder as well as you know, the rest of the arm. And so this is what I mean by tension points. With the S. There has to be something that's holding the clothing in place, and that something is exerting some pressure that you will see in the form of a tip of a triangle in most cases, while the rest is being pulled away by some other force, usually wind, gravity, or another tension point. But there's even more variables to keep in mind, like how hard the shirt is being pulled or how much of the shirt is between the 2 points. For example, if it was being pulled hard, the triangles would be much more narrow and horizontal. Let's take a look at the other 2 parts of the shirt as well. On the left sleeve, we see a very similar triangle formation to the middle, That's because most of the pressure is being exerted at the armpit with the arm pulling the shirt up, but gravity still wins near the bottom left corner of this, as you can see the sleeve being pulled down. If we look closer on the right side, we have a similar story to the middle again, but with a lot less cloth to work with, resulting in a lot thinner shapes. So with all this logic of gravity, tension, and pressure, we're able to emulate the physics of basically any piece of cloth that we want. Same logic applies to the pants, by the way, it's just in a bit of a different configuration, with the pressure being applied horizontally at the waist, so a lot of the shapes will start from the waist down or the knees if there's any bending in the legs. So with the general concepts of shapes and tension/gravity out of the way, we can essentially draw any normal piece of clothing, shirts, shorts, sweaters, or pants in any normal conditions. What about not so normal conditions? Namely, what about wind, in situations where you would want to draw a very big dress, action poses, or just people in outdoor environments? Wind is a very big factor you need to take account of, and depending on how strong, it could even beat out gravity in terms of importance. So here's the next photo, and we'll mainly be focusing on this flowing dress, and I immediately want to take note of, well, the flow in the dress. There's a lot more, say, curvature to these lines, even if we were to compare them with the first few studies that we did, and this is the case for pretty much every piece of clothing in wind. It's a lot more free and less rigid. You don't want something flowing in the wind to be stiff, and it's for this reason that we could see a lot more deformation when it comes to the original shapes, as well as a lot bigger shapes than something that, say, has a lot less slack. Looking closer, we can see that this follows the general rule of the last concept of tension, with a lot of the shapes starting at the waist, but this is where things start to get interesting. So we can see that she's moving towards the right and the wind is blowing the dress to the left, but if we look at this front foot, we can see that it is landing, stopping the motion. So with this information, we can infer a few things. The first is that she's either jumping forward and landing on the left foot, or stopping and turning to her left, but because of the way that she's slanting, I'm more inclined to believe that it's the first theory. With this, the side on the left facing away from the camera is stopping in motion, while the side towards us is still in motion, leading to what we see here, where the dress starts going on one side but twists to another while she's stopping with her foot. You with me? No? That's fine, I'll just explain again. So alright, while in theory this sounds super complicated, in practice there's just 3 things you mainly need to look out for: where the wind is blowing, the motion of your character, and what contact points or motions are interrupting the natural flow of the material in said wind. Alright, that still sounds complicated. Sometimes your character will just be standing still and all you have to think about is the wind and how the clothes tug on the side of that character. Sometimes you're working with an action pose that twists and turns the clothes in a lot of different ways. There's not really one solution that fits every situation. Personally, I just like to treat the wind like another flowy form of gravity, and it tilts all the shapes towards it, but not in like a normal tilt kind of way, more of like a lokified tool to the bottom of a triangle kind of way, you know what I mean? And the only time clothes in wind should be changing direction is when there's something in the way that is opposing the flow of that wind, like the character's arm or like moving in the opposite direction or just staying still. By the way, a lot of this section counts for hair, so call this a 2-in-1 video, you're very welcome. So that's all the key concepts I would focus on when drawing all of my clothing, but there's a few final variables that really change up the way you apply these things, with the biggest in my opinion being the texture, or rather material of the fabric. Now I can't go over every single material that exists in the world, but I can tell you the general way that fabrics will change the way you draw your clothes. So in this drawing we have a very thick winter coat and scarf, meanwhile over here we have clothing made with more standard fabric. In between the two you can probably already tell what I'm gonna say. The thicker fabric on the left is a lot more tolerant to folding, at least visibly on the surface, and at the times when it does fold it is very pronounced, so you can really tell that there's 2 pieces of, you know, shirt or sweater or something folding on top of each other, while on the other outfit there's folds and creases all over the place. I mean, just look at the fronts of these 2 outfits. One has virtually no folds while the other one has like at least 20. So as you go thicker on the material, the more it wants to hold to its original shape, but there's some materials that don't really follow this rule, namely leather. Leather is weird. It's weird. It's slightly reflective of light, but not enough to actually show an image like metal, and it has a lot more visual change on the surface even though the material itself is thick. I don't know what else to say, leather is just weird. But okay, I have these things drawn. How do I shade and render them? I hit my mic. First we create a base color layer, obviously, and then I code it all in a multiply layer to create the shadow and erase the parts where I want light. But the thing you really want to learn if you want your clothes to look nice and realistic is how to edge. Alright, master edger here, and we're gonna do a quick course on how you can edge effectively. Alright, let's get into it. So you want to edge pretty much wherever there is a hard transition between light and shadow. Let's take it back to a previous example. On this dress, there's a lot of color and light transitions that make it look, well, pretty good. Why is that? Well, it's because I'm balancing the hard edges of where the light usually hits the dress with the soft edges that transition between two colors or transition between two relatively similarly lit areas. Even just the simple use of a blur tool in certain areas will really balance out your clothing, so I suggest you start doing that. Now, the second biggest thing is values. You need to match the value range of your base colors. If certain parts end up too bright or dark, it will look out of place. And while this advice sounds pretty easy to do on, say, a white shirt or other desaturated or light colors, it's when you get into the really saturated or dark color ranges where it's very easy to overdo it on the lighting and make things too bright or not add enough of a difference where things just kind of blend together. I'll probably make a dedicated video over these later, most likely edging, because I am the master edger, maybe even the edge lord, maybe the edge meister, I don't know, something along these lines. But for now, I hope you guys learned a thing or two about clothes, and remember, a lot of this stuff applies to hair as well. You're welcome times 2. If you liked the video, consider giving it a like, and maybe, hopefully, theoretically, philosophically, metaphorically, even hitting the subscribe button. I've got a few different videos in the works. I hope you guys are looking forward to that, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.